There's a lot of talk on the left about 2020 and who's the best to lead the progressive movement. One name always comes up in these conversations. That name is Tulsi Gabbard. Is she the great hope of the progressive left? This is We the People.
Mr. Speaker, under U.S. law, it is illegal for you or me or any American to provide any type of assistance to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or other terrorist groups. If we broke this law, we'd be thrown in jail. Yet the U.S. government's been violating this law for years, directly and indirectly supporting allies and partners of groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, with money, weapons, intelligence, and other support in their fight to overthrow the Syrian government. A recent New York Times article confirmed that rebel groups supported by the U.S., quote, have entered into battlefield alliances with the affiliate of Al-Qaeda in Syria, formerly known as al-Nusra. The Wall Street Journal reports that rebel groups are, quote, doubling down on their alliance with Al-Qaeda. This alliance has rendered the phrase moderate rebels meaningless. We must stop this madness. We must stop arming terrorists. I'm introducing the Stop Arming Terrorists Act today to prohibit taxpayer dollars from being used to support terrorists. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Now for full disclosure. First, I am a Tulsi supporter. I do feel that she is a voice for the progressive movement. That being said, I have entered into this looking at the Congresswoman with an open mind, digging into her background as fully as I can, not being a journalist or a reporter, to come away expecting to come away with a bad taste in my mouth, as I often do with any politician I look at in depth. That being said, to investigate or look into any politician, one must begin where the trail should start. Show me the money. Specifically, who are her campaign donors? Well, Miss Gabbard's number one donor is a company called Navitech Limited, a shipbuilding and refurbishing company which has offices in Rhode Island and, of course, in Hawaii. Total donations for the year 2015 are around $16,000. Second on the list is Almex USA with $15,000 in 2015. Now, Almex is an aluminum casting company based out of California. I'm going to assume that they have business and connections with Navitech. The third is an apparel company, a fitness apparel company called Upcountry, with $11,000 in 2015, followed by Mosaic Media, a Hollywood marketing and media firm whose biggest public claim to fame is that horrible Scooby-Doo movie. Then there's American Spray Tech, a hair care company out of New Jersey. At last, Sportswear, who obviously makes sportswear. And rounding out the top five is Alchemy, a data tech and green energy company out of Maryland. Now, all of these last three gave in the area of $10,000. Now, personally, I'm from the school of thought that believes that all politicians should be limited to raising funds in their home state. But trust me, Tulsi Gabbard is possibly the least guilty of out-of-state funding, or at least one of the least guilty. Now, who are the worst donors in my personal opinion? That's easy, and I'm sure you'll all agree. Banks, oil and fossil fuel companies, and anyone in the healthcare industry as a whole, especially Big Pharma. But you don't see any of those on Miss Gabbard's public disclosure records. And that's a good thing. When you drop down to the lower rankings of her donors, it rounds out with a bunch of smaller company donations and a lot of union support, which in my mind is a good thing, because unions are people, the American worker. Now, the congressional record. First, let me say that I will not go over her entire record here, because neither of us wants this episode to be 4 or 5 hours long. I will hit the highlights, where she voted, in my opinion, against or for progressive issues, and I suggest you do your own research if you wish to dive deeper. The Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act. This one's going to be ugly. And I'm sure I'm going to get some people out there who are listening to this who are going to disagree with me wholeheartedly, but hear me out before you get angry. This is that notorious bill which allows Americans to sue foreign countries, specifically Saudi Arabia in this case. I was personally against this bill for one basic reason. It was horribly written, and it allows anyone in our government or our military to be open to lawsuit by outside countries and persons. Now, this was a stupid excuse for a bill, quite honestly. It was written horribly. For all the right reasons, it was still written horribly. I get it. 9/11 victims and the victims of terrorism should be able to sue those who do them harm or injure, or members of their family. And I agree with that in theory. But you have to admit, given the history of the United States, we've done some pretty horrible things to people. And the way this bill was written, opening up the Saudis for legal liability would also open up American agencies and individual persons within the military to lawsuits. It was simply a horribly written bill. You see where I'm going here. Now, I'm not saying that 9/11 survivors are not entitled. And I'm not saying that I don't have any sympathy for them, because I certainly do. It's just that this particular bill was a horrible bill in the way that it was written and conceived. Barack Obama agreed with me and vetoed this bill. And then after that, Mitch McConnell and half the Republican House and Senate agreed too, after they voted to override his veto. Now, the bill was written by people who don't have a clue about our own liability in the world, or they simply never bothered to read it, which is exactly what Mitch McConnell actually admitted, that he didn't read the bill. But Miss Gabbard, she voted for it too. So I asked Miss Gabbard, did you read the bill? Because things like this are something you need to consider carefully before signing on to a bill that puts both our country, our national security, and our soldiers at risk. And this bill directly affects everyone who ever wore the uniform. But I'll move on. She voted against the Zika bill. I can only assume this is due to her stance against pesticide use, which is a factor in the bill. She voted yes on the bill which prevents government funds from being used to discriminate against LGBT, so that's a good one. She also votes in favor of an open internet and open internet policies in general, which is also a good thing. But here's an interesting one. She voted against development of oil reserves on Native American lands. Now, that was back in 2015, so she was for Standing Rock before the standoff in Standing Rock ever began. It's always good to see nice surprises like that on someone's record. Now, here's one that also we have to dive into a little deeper. She voted against H.R. 1599, the Safe and Accurate Labeling Act of 2015. Now, this one's a stickler because on its face it appears to be a pro-GMO bill, pro-labeling. But in truth, it wasn't really that. It allowed GMO food-producing companies to label GMO foods as all natural, in a way to avoid the GMO stigma, and Gabbard voted against it. So if you're a Gabbard fan, watch for this one to be thrown back in her face when she runs for president if she does. But don't buy the hype. Read the bill. I would have voted against it too. It favors the food companies, not public safety, public health, and public information, as it should. I personally don't have a stance on GMO one way or the other, but if you're going to have laws labeling things, you need to be above board with what those laws really are for. Now, I scanned all the way back to 2013, and though I found a few which raised an eyebrow or two, when you dig into the bill, I found reasons to vote yes or no, just like she did. She votes pro-veteran on all the time, obviously, and she votes against tax breaks most of the time. Overall, I see no horrible missteps except the whole 9/11 Justice Bill. To cap this off, I have to say that I was pro-Tulsi to begin with, and after digging deeper, I'm still pro-Tulsi. The biggest issue her detractors have is her religion, which I won't even discuss, because I'm an atheist, and I believe in the separation of church and state as an absolute. So as long as she does her praying on her own time and keeps it out of Congress, she can pray to who or whatever she pleases. Now, we all know the DNC can't stand her because she backed Bernie and stabbed Debbie Wassershit in the back, which alone makes me even more in favor of Tulsi. But I caution you, don't ever for 1 minute believe that a politician is a saint or beyond reproach. Not Tulsi, not Bernie, none of them. Power corrupts, and corruption is the rule of the day in Washington. That being said, so far Tulsi has proven to have some principles, be unafraid of rocking the political boat, and standing on her own convictions. Will she be the first woman president? Who knows? But if she's your pick, you better get in line today and start making it happen. The campaign to put Tulsi Gabbard in the White House began November 10th of 2016 because it will be an uphill battle all the way to get the job done. You won't just be against Republicans, you'll be against the established Democratic Party. Now I'm going to take a moment of shameless promotion here, mainly because I just simply like this cut. I'm going to let Tulsi end the show for me today. Bear with me.
Being a warrior is about believing in what you are fighting for and holding strong to those convictions. I felt a sense of duty, and I could not in good conscience stay back here in beautiful Hawaii and watch my brothers and sisters in uniform go off into combat. These are people and friends who we never forget and who we strive to honor every day that we are blessed to live and breathe. Bernie Sanders voted against the Iraq War. He understands the cost of war, that cost is continued when our veterans come home. Bernie Sanders will defend our country and take the trillions of dollars that are spent on these interventionist, regime change, unnecessary wars and invest it here at home. The American people are not looking to settle for inches. They're looking for real change. What I saw in Bernie was a heart of aloha. No matter who you are, where you come from in this country, that we are all in this together. My name is Tulsi Gabbard, and I support Bernie Sanders to be our next president and commander-in-chief.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
Now, when I first started this Tulsi Gabbard segment, I was going to do this as a one-off thing, just to answer some questions people may have on Tulsi. But since I started this, I've decided to move on and go ahead and start a congressional record series and do backgrounds on representatives in Washington, just like this one, and begin a playlist on my YouTube channel called The Congressional Record. If you have suggestions on who you'd like me to cover, please drop me a note at WTPAmerica@hotmail.com. Subscribe to the channel. Visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/WTPAmerica. Or drop over to the written blog at WTPAmerica.org. I'm Alan Garrett. You've been listening to We the People. And always resist.